Now the next thing we're going to do in time value money now, we're going to talk about annuities. And just so you understand as we go through this, when we start talking about annuities, I'm only going to be talking about ordinary regular annuities, the payments that come at the end of every time period. Annuity dues, I'm going to save that till kind of the end of the lecture, and I'm going to show you how to handle annuity dues and what you do with annuity dues. Nothing complicated. But until I tell you differently though, the type of annuities that we're going to be dealing with, these are strictly ordinary regular annuities. Now, if you timelined out an annuity and you knew the value of the annuity out into the future, but the question was, what's it worth today? Again, the unknowns in the present, we use our present value interest factor for an annuity. If you knew the value of the annuity out into the future, but the question was, what's the annuity going to be worth at some point in time out in the future, the unknowns in the future, we're going to use our future value interest factor for an annuity. Now, I found over the years that, if you don't do anything else, students kind of make up a bunch of rules about annuity. That is, if on a test, if I tell you this and that, you're going to have a rule that says, well, I do thus and thus. Or if I tell you this, and that, then you're going to do that and that. And they come into class and they have all these rules, and they really just don't know how to handle annuities. Now, again, that's something that I don't want you to do. I don't want you to come up with a bunch of rules for everything. And to get around that now, I just made up a formula. And that's this formula right here. And I want you to understand now, this formula only has 3 components. You'll always know 2 of them. So the math involved in here means I've got one equation with one unknown. 6 is equal to 2 times something. You have to be able to tell me that that something is 3. So this is one equation. You'll always know 2 of the factors in it. So you'll know these 2 or these 2 or whatever it is, but you'll only be solving for one of these unknowns. Now, what are these things? Well, this dollar amount, that's what I call the big dollar amount. And when I run into students years later, out somewhere, this is what they tell me they remember. Now, the big dollar amount. In an annuity problem now, there's going to be 2 dollar amounts. There's going to be a dollar amount like $90,000. And there'll be another dollar amount that's like $12,000. Which one's the big dollar amount? Well, the $90,000. Now, in our parlance in here, what we're talking about, that other dollar amount, that $12,000, that always turns out to be the smaller dollar amount, but it's also the value of the annuity. But nonetheless, though, the big dollar amount, that's simply the biggest dollar amount that's in the problem. And that's what I call the big dollar amount. A sub n, this stands for the value of the annuity. So if I told you that you were going to get $1,000 a year for 20 years, what's the value of the annuity? $1,000. The other factor now, IF, this simply means interest factor. And as I told you before now, when you're dealing with annuities, you're either going to use your PVIFA or your FVIFA, one or the other. As a student, you should be looking at this right now thinking, I think I can tell the difference between $90,000 and $12,000. I should be able to do that. The real question here becomes, which interest factor do I use? Do I use PVIFA or do I use FVIFA? And indeed, on exams, that's where students get things wrong. Instead of using PVIFA, they use FVIFA. Or if instead of FVIFA, they use PVIFA. They'll come up to me after an exam and say, Dr. Riley, the only thing I got wrong is I used the wrong interest factor. That's the only decision you had to make. That's the only thing you had to decide, and you did it wrong. Now, on my exams, you're not going to get full credit for getting the wrong interest factor table. But nonetheless, this is the general equation for doing annuities. That's what I call it. And this is how we're going to always look through it. So if you read a problem and you decide that it's an annuity problem, it's not a lump sum problem, it's an annuity problem, this is the first thing you should write down. And then you fill in what you know. What's not there is what you need to solve for. So it might be the annuity in some problems, it might be the big dollar amount in some problems, and you're going to find out that it might be the I in the interest factor, the rate of return. But nonetheless, we're going to go through all those types of problems in here, but I want to introduce you to the general equation for dealing with annuities. This is the first thing you should write down when you determine that you have an annuity problem.